My name is Ray Decker. I'm 36 years old. I live alone in a second-floor apartment in Akron, Ohio, in a building where I know every tenant by name and have fixed every leaking faucet on the floor at least once, usually for free, usually on a Saturday morning before I had my coffee. I drive a white work van with a dent on the rear panel from a parking lot in 2019 that I keep meaning to get fixed and never do. My hands are never fully clean. Not in the way that people in offices have clean hands. I scrub them every night, but there are lines in the knuckles that stay dark no matter what. Lines that 14 years of pipe work and soldering and crawling through floors have put there permanently. I'm a licensed master plumber. I own a small company called Decker & Sons, which is a bit of a joke because I don't have sons. I have 3 employees, and the name belonged to my Uncle Roy, who started the business and left it to me when his knees gave out 6 years ago. It pays the bills. It does more than that, honestly. On a good year, we do solid work, and I take real pride in that. The kind of pride that doesn't need anyone to notice. I don't go to events. I don't own a tuxedo. I don't network. I go to work. I come home. I heat something up. I watch half a documentary. I fall asleep earlier than I intend to. That is my life, and I have never had any particular complaint about it. Which is why I should have said no when Marcus called. Marcus Webb and I served together in the Army for 3 years, and the friendship that survived that tends to survive most things. He sells commercial real estate now and moves through a world of dinners and fundraisers and people with business cards that include the word philanthropist. Every few months, he calls and says some version of the same thing. Ray, you need to get out of that apartment. Ray, there will be people there. Ray, you might actually like it. I never like it, but I always go, because Marcus is one of the few people left who knew me before I knew what I was doing with my life. And that means something I don't have words for. The event was a charity dinner for a children's literacy nonprofit at the Meridian Grand Hotel downtown. $250 a plate, which Marcus paid for because I would not have. Black tie optional, which I interpreted as wear the navy blazer that still fit from a cousin's wedding 4 years ago. I got there early, which is a habit from the Army that I have never shaken. The ballroom was enormous. All gold light and white tablecloths, and the kind of floral arrangements that cost more than a new water heater. I found my table, table 11 near the back, and sat down next to a centerpiece that blocked my view of the stage, and a water glass I was afraid to touch in case I held it wrong. The woman sat down next to me at 7:14. I know the time because I had been checking my watch and calculating when it would be acceptable to leave. She was probably 34 or 35. Dark hair swept up, a green dress that cost what I make in a decent week, and the posture of someone who had spent a lifetime in rooms exactly like this one. She glanced at the seat card, then at me, with the quick automatic appraisal that people do when they're trying to figure out whether a stranger is worth talking to. I recognized it. I wasn't offended by it. People size each other up. It's human. She introduced herself as Sloan Merritt. I told her my name. We shook hands. She had a firm grip, which I respected. For a while, we talked the way people talk at these things. The weather, the room, the nonprofit, how long the speeches usually ran. She was smart, quick, the kind of person who had a response ready before you finished your sentence. Not because she wasn't listening, but because she processed fast. I found out she ran a tech company, something in logistics software, offices in Cleveland and Chicago, 30-some employees. She asked the questions people at these dinners always ask. What industry are you in? Do you work locally? Do you do any investing? Then she asked what I actually did. I said I was a plumber. I said it the same way I say everything, directly and without apology, because it's true, and I'm not embarrassed by it. She laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel in an obvious way. It was the small, reflexive kind of laugh that escapes before a person decides whether it's appropriate. A half-second of sound that said, without any words, I wasn't expecting that. And what I expected would have been something worth taking seriously. She caught herself, covered it with, "Oh, sorry, you don't seem like," and then trailed off, because there was no way to finish that sentence without making it worse. I looked at her for a moment. Not angry. I wasn't angry. I was something quieter than angry. Something that comes from having the same moment happen enough times that it no longer surprises you, but still lands the same way every time. I said, "No, it's fine." And I meant it. It was fine. People show you who they are, and then you know. I turned back to my plate. I ate the salad. I listened to the first speaker. When Marcus stopped by the table to check on me, I told him I wasn't feeling well and would probably head out after the second course. He gave me the look he gives me when he knows I'm lying but isn't going to push it. I appreciated that. I left at 8:40, walked to my van in the hotel parking garage, drove home, changed out of the blazer, and sat down on my couch with a glass of water. And the vague, dissatisfied feeling that comes not from being insulted, but from having briefly hoped that the room would be different this time. I was in bed by 10:30. The knock came at 11:53. I know because I looked at my phone when I heard it, thinking at first it was the tenant in 2C who sometimes locked herself out. I put on a sweatshirt and opened the door. It was Sloane Merritt. She wasn't in the green dress anymore. She had a coat on over what looked like a hotel bathrobe, which told me she had either changed quickly or not entirely. Her hair was still up, but looser now, and there was mascara that had migrated slightly under one eye. She looked like someone who had made a decision in a hurry and was only now catching up to it. I stared at her. She stared at me. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said, "I need a plumber." I let that sit for a second. "You drove from the Meridian to tell me that." The hotel sent someone. He looked at it for 20 minutes and said the main valve was on the floor below, and he didn't have clearance to access it tonight. There's water coming through the bathroom floor. It's going into the closet. She paused. The concierge said they could have someone here by 8 a.m. 8 a.m. is a long time if it's coming through the floor. That's what I thought. I looked at her face. Whatever she was going to say next, she said it with her eyes first. Something between embarrassment and a kind of honest reckoning that I didn't expect from her. "I also wanted to apologize," she said, "for earlier. That laugh. It wasn't kind, and it wasn't accurate, and I'm sorry." I held the doorframe for a moment. The hallway light was buzzing slightly, the way it did every couple of weeks before the bulb needed changing. I made a note to fix it in the morning. "Come in," I said. "Let me get my bag." She stood in my kitchen while I pulled on my work boots and loaded the essentials into a canvas bag. Wrench set, tape, pressure gauge, a flashlight I trusted. The kitchen was clean but not decorated. A coffee maker, a cutting board, a magnet on the fridge from a hardware supplier in Cleveland. She looked around the way people look around a room when they're trying to understand someone quickly. "How long have you lived here?" she asked.
7 years.
"Do you own it?"
No, I own the building on Prospect where the shop is.
She looked at me. I could see her recalibrating something. "I assumed," she started. "People usually do," I said. Not harshly, just factually. We drove to the Meridian in my van. She sat in the passenger seat among the invoices and the spare fittings and a granola bar wrapper I hadn't thrown away yet, and didn't apologize for it. I told her what questions to ask the hotel to get access to the mechanical room. She took notes in her phone. The job took an hour and 40 minutes. A supply line fitting had failed on the 3rd floor, the floor above her room, and the water had been tracking down between the walls before finding the path of least resistance through her bathroom ceiling. The hotel's maintenance team had missed it because they'd been looking at the wrong junction point. I found it in 11 minutes, fixed it in 40, ran the pressure test twice to be sure, the way my Uncle Roy taught me, because a fix you're not sure about isn't a fix. It's a delay. Sloane sat on the edge of the hotel bed and watched me work. She didn't talk much, which I appreciated. She handed me the flashlight when I needed both hands, which I noticed. When I started packing up, she said, "You're very calm." "It's just water," I said. "Water always goes somewhere. You just have to figure out where it decided to go." She was quiet for a moment. That's the most philosophical thing anyone has said to me all week. "Low bar at that dinner." She laughed, a real one this time, different from the one at the table. This one had some weight to it, like she was laughing at something that also cost her a little. I told her the hotel would need to inspect the ceiling for moisture damage in the morning. I told her to ask specifically about the fitting on the supply line and make sure they documented the repair in writing. She wrote it all down. In the parking garage, she stopped at my van. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing." I put the bag in the back. "Ray, you called at midnight. I came. That's what this work is." I looked at her. The apology covered the rest. She stood there in the fluorescent light of the parking garage, coat over a hotel bathrobe, mascara still slightly smudged, and something in her expression settled into something that wasn't embarrassment anymore. Something quieter. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." At the table, when I laughed. "Why didn't you say anything?" "You could have. I deserved it." I thought about how to answer that honestly. Because the point wouldn't have been to correct you. The point would have been to make you feel bad, and that's not something I'm interested in. She looked at me for a long moment. That's either very mature or very frustrating. Probably both. She pulled her coat tighter. I build software that optimizes supply chain logistics. Last year, I was named one of 40 under 40 in my industry. I have a condo in 2 cities, and I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. She said it flatly, like a list she'd memorized, and was now hearing from the outside for the first time. And tonight, I showed up at a stranger's door in a hotel bathrobe because I didn't know how water moved through a wall. I didn't say anything. "I laughed at you," she said quietly, "because for about half a second, you reminded me of every version of myself I left behind to become the thing on that business card. And that's not your fault. That's mine." The parking garage was very quiet. Somewhere above us, a car alarm went off briefly and then stopped. "I grew up in a house where the heat didn't always work," she said. "My dad fixed things himself because we couldn't afford to call anyone. He had hands like yours." She stopped. "I forgot that, somewhere. I don't know when exactly." I locked the van and turned to face her. "You remembered tonight?" She looked at me like she was deciding something. Then she said, "If I called your company on a legitimate job, would you take it?" "Depends on the job." "My Chicago office is expanding. New floor, new plumbing. The contractor keeps telling me it's fine, and I don't think it's fine." "Send me the specs," I said. "I'll tell you whether it's fine." She pulled out her phone, and we exchanged numbers standing between a hotel shuttle and my work van at 12:47 in the morning. She typed her contact in as Sloan Merritt, Logistics, which made me smile. I drove home with the windows cracked and the familiar smell of Akron in November coming through the van. I thought about my Uncle Roy, who used to say that the only difference between a good plumber and a bad one was whether they cared what happened after they left, whether the fix was about them feeling finished or about the problem actually being solved. I thought that might apply to more things than plumbing. 3 weeks later, Sloan sent the specs. The contractor had used the wrong pipe diameter on 4 of the 6 main runs, which would have caused pressure variance and accelerated wear within 18 months. She thanked me in an email that was 2 paragraphs long and careful, and nothing like the woman at the dinner table. It sounded like someone being honest rather than impressive. I said back a 3-line summary of the issue and a recommendation for a licensed firm in Chicago I trusted. She wrote, "You could have taken the job yourself." I wrote back, "Chicago's a long way for a guy who lives in Akron, but I know people who do good work." She wrote, "Is that how you operate? You just send people to other people who do good work?" I thought about it for a moment. Then I wrote, "Mostly, I try to make sure the water ends up where it's supposed to. The rest usually follows." There was a pause of about 40 minutes. Then, "I think I've been optimizing the wrong things." I read that message sitting in my van in the parking lot of a hardware store in the middle of a Tuesday, and I thought about the woman in the hotel bathrobe standing under the fluorescent lights of a parking garage, remembering a house where the heat didn't always work, and a father who fixed things with his hands. Some people build their whole life trying to get away from where they started. Some people spend years getting back to it. Most people don't notice the difference until something breaks in the middle of the night and they realize they don't know how water moves through a wall. I'm glad I answered the door. If this story made you think of someone who works with their hands and deserves more than they usually get, share it with them. And if you've been in that room where someone laughed at the wrong moment, leave a comment. I read every one. See you in the next one.